All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Now, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance took to social media on Friday, right before the weekend, to call out Canada's political leadership and, quote, immigration insanity, blaming it for the stagnation of Canada's economy. In a series of posts on X, Vance pointed to data he says shows Canada's living standards slipping behind the U.S. and the U.K. in recent years, and he linked that trend to Canada having the highest proportion of foreign-born residents in the G7. Let's try and get, we're going to try and get beyond the tweets and into the data with Ian Lee. He's going to join us any second. I should point out one thing. Forget about the reasons why for a second. One thing is true. Canada's GDP has stagnated for a long time. It's been over a decade now where the OECD, right, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, say that the average yearly growth rate for Canada's GDP has been anemic, 0.6%. And we have to point out it's hard to have a GDP growth that's so low when your immigration numbers are so high. We're going to go to Ian Lee now from the Sprott School of Business. He's on the line. Ian, welcome back to the program.
My pleasure.
I love talking to you because, to put it bluntly, you seem to cut through the crap and just get into what the data says. Okay, so right. I've done a decent job opening this up here and talking about what J.D. Vance tweeted about. He's making this link between, immigration insanity, as he puts it, and the economic stagnation that we've had. How do you see it? What do the numbers tell us?
I don't think it's immigration, quite frankly, as such. I'm not suggesting that the Canadian immigration system that under Trudeau was the appropriate way to go. I've been very critical of it, that he changed the mix, and we went from a policy that supported highly skilled immigrants to lower skilled immigrants. And there's a wide consensus that is what happened, and that's why the new government is making such major changes. But my point I wanted to make, Elias, is the stagnation that we're facing in Canada over the last 10 years, I think, was much more due to the policies of the government that emphasize consumption and redistribution instead of economic growth, instead of growing the pie to make the pie much larger. And so what he did was on immigration, well, it's been heavily criticized, including by his own government, by ministers and MPs in his own government. The cause of the stagnation in Canada was because of things like Bill C-69, the no pipeline bill, the tanker ban bill, restrictions on economic growth, on foreign direct investment, and a general economic climate that discouraged investment in Canada. And so they made a series of bad decisions, and certainly the decision to triple immigration was one of those. But I don't think that was the cause of what drove our numbers and made our numbers go south.
I think we should talk about what set off the vice president of the U.S. on Twitter. So, in fact, he was quote tweeting another tweet by a gentleman named Michael Arouet, and he sent out a tweet with a graph, a chart of Canada's living standards growth since about 2016, okay?
Yeah.
And his commentary was, what happened in Canada will be studied by many historians and economists as the prime example of self-destruction of an otherwise prosperous nation after blindly following left ideology. His words, not your words, not my words, okay?
Right.
And then that chart, and it does show, if you look at that chart, and it shows Canada and the U.S. and the U.K. basically with the same standard of living in 2016, 2017, 2018.
That's right.
And then we all start to break apart and Canada brings in the rear.
By the way, Elias, I don't disagree with that stat at all. In fact, I've been showing it to my students for quite some time now, for several years. I'm doing a presentation tomorrow in Vancouver. I'm just flying out tonight and giving the speech, and then I'm coming back to Ottawa because I have to teach on Wednesday. But I'm using those stats showing that a series of economic decisions in the last 10 years were very, very harmful to the standard of living. Our productivity has been in precipitous decline. The Bank of Canada, in their speeches in the last 2 years, has given some excellent speeches showing how our productivity declined. And it was because of, as I said, policies that inhibited growth, that slowed down growth, that was hostile to investment by Canadian companies and foreign companies in Canada. And so I don't dispute at all the idea that our standard of living has declined relative to the United States on a GDP per person basis. It's absolutely correct.
So one of the Go ahead.
So the numbers are bad. I mean, we have one of the charts graphs I'm showing tomorrow, shows how foreign direct investment in Canada is declining. We have Canadian capital leaving Canada and going to the States because it's more attractive there than here. And why this is such a terrible thing is that investment in our country is what creates the jobs of tomorrow. It means investment in factories, investment in technology, investment in new companies, and that is the lifeblood of an economy. And because of this environment over the last 10 years that was so hostile to business and put barriers in front of business, both foreign and domestic investment, we are paying the price through a decline in our standard of living on a per-person basis, comparing Canada to the U.S. or Canada to the OECD countries. So, in fact, we're often dead last in many of these metrics.
So based on everything you just said, it does lead me to the tweet from J.D. Vance that we haven't covered yet. We're with Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business. So J.D. Vance also sent out this tweet, okay? And with all due respect to my Canadian friends whose politics focus obsessively on the United States, your stagnating living standards have nothing to do with Donald Trump or whatever boogeyman the CBC tells you to blame. The fault lies with your leadership elected by you. It's blunt, but is he right?
I have been saying quite so blunt terms, but pretty close. I've been saying that. In fact, Jean Charest said 2 weeks ago in Montreal, one day we'll thank Trump because he said he wasn't celebrating Trump. I'm not celebrating him, but what he forced us to confront the mistakes and the very poor policy choices that we have made over the last 10 years and longer, but especially so over the last 10 years. And most of these mistakes these are mistakes that we Canadians have been scoring on our own net. These are mistakes we have made. They're not because of Donald Trump. You know, we've been protecting our economy and keeping out foreign competition and putting restrictions on economic investment in this country, not because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump's only been a president in office for 6 or 8 or 9 months. And this decline in the stats, these economic stats that show the decline, have been going on for the last 10 years. And this has been shown by people like John Manley in his speeches, former Liberal finance minister, and other very neutral observers who have documented these declines in our various economic stats. David Dodge, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, has talked about this, our declining productivity, our declining investment. And these were because of poor decisions made during the Trudeau years by the Trudeau government.
So let me ask you, Ian, because based on everything we've talked about so far, I hope you're about to tell me that the budget that was just passed, the budget that was passed last week, takes all of that into account and moves to fix those problems.
Not yet. Some of the announcements, and their announcements, let's be very clear, may help address our collapsing foreign direct investment, our collapsing capital investment, our collapsing productivity, our decline in productivity. We will see. My concern is that they're using the government to administer these major projects, when I would much prefer they simply remove the barriers and the red tape and the legislation that Mr. Trudeau had passed that has inhibited and slowed down or restricted our investment. They're using government as the agent of change, if I can put it that way. And I just don't think that that's the role of government, and government's record on dealing with economic growth is not good. Their job is not to pick winners and losers or to identify 10 special projects for investment. What they should be doing is removing all the barriers, the red tape, as I said, and then announcing that, of course, to business and encouraging them to go in and do these projects directly, whether it's a pipeline project, critical minerals project, or whatever, using the policies of the last probably 30, 40, 50 years, because the Liberal government in power most of the 75, I think it's 3/4 of the last century, and they have a tendency to rely much more on the government and the state to drive economic growth. As they announced that they were going to build battery plants, and I don't think that that's the role and the track record of government in running businesses or in selecting the winners and losers, or selecting the winners is not good. It's problematic.
Ian, what do you say? Because I have a note from a listener that says, your bias against the Liberals is staggering. And of late, I get accused of that, but I'm just like, guys, I just care about the economy. I just want us to have the same standard of living as the United States. That's all I want. What do you say to that?
I will respond to that. There's no question that the former Trudeau government's record on economic policy was very, very poor. There's many Liberals who have publicly criticized it. I do make a distinction between the former government and the current government. I mean, Mr. Carney is refocusing on investment projects. So the listener who said that is not perhaps understanding I'm making a sharp distinction between the policies of the former government, which were focused on consumption and redistribution, and this government that is focused on growth and investment, making the pie bigger. So to suggest that my comments about both governments is identical or the same is simply not correct. I'm not saying that. What I'm suggesting with the current government, they're going in the right direction. The Trudeau's government was going in the wrong direction. The Carney government's going in the right direction. What I was suggesting is that the strategy of getting there can be critiqued, and relying on the government to focus on and deliver the investment and economic growth, when the record of governments everywhere has not been that stellar. And so I'm saying he's going in the right direction, but I disagree with the policy way, the policy instrument, the way he's doing it, which is to rely on government project offices. And by the way, there are former Liberals saying this. Anne McClellan was the deputy Liberal prime minister under Paul Martin, and she's been publishing comments that are very critical of the Trudeau years. So has John Manley. So have other Liberals have criticized the record of the Trudeau years, and the stats are very clear. Our average income per person did go down. Our productivity has declined very dramatically. Capital investment has declined. This isn't a bias. This is hard empirical trend data. In fact, it was Carney during the election campaign who said we're going in the wrong direction. It was Carney who said we've got to change direction. We're at a turning point, he said. So for those who don't like what I'm saying, well, then they should listen to Mr. Carney. He's saying something quite similar, actually, to what I'm saying. The difference is I'm saying we should rely more on the private sector to achieve that turnaround rather than relying on government agencies like the major projects.
Ian, I have to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Ian Lee, boy, it's always enlightening talking to him. He's from the Sprott School of Business. He's an associate professor over there.
I'm Dylan Playfair.
And I'm Tyler Smith.
We're putting loneliness in the penalty box by talking to some of our favorite athletes about the importance of friendship.
This is Bromance.
Bromance is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian-owned and operated. Charm has been part of your love stories and bromances for over 50 years. And you can find Bromance on the iHeartRadio network or wherever you get your podcasts.